Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to help you get a handle on some really big ideas. And today, we're tackling something foundational. Samma Kammanta, right action. Our goal isn't just to define it. We really want to get into this inherent tension, right? The ideal of total non-harm, ahimsa, versus, well, the real world. What happens when protecting someone means you might have to physically intervene, maybe even cause harm?
That's the crux of it, yeah. It's a serious ethical tightrope. And it shows that right action isn't just, ticking boxes. Fundamentally, Samma Kammanta is about correct physical action. It's about making sure your actions, your physical interactions are wholesome, meaning they don't cause harm, either to yourself or to others.
Okay, so let's lay down the basics first. Right action starts with not doing certain things, these three core physical abstentions, sometimes called virtues.
Exactly. It starts there. First, you commit to not killing or harming. Then, not stealing, basically respecting what belongs to others. And third, avoiding sexual misconduct, so honoring relationships and fidelity. These three, they come straight from the main precepts, and they really form the bedrock.
And they work on two levels, don't they? They help create a peaceful society, sure, but they're also about your own, inner equilibrium.
Absolutely. By steering clear of those actions, you cultivate inner peace. And this is crucial. You stop creating new negative karma, that sort of karmic burden. It really clears the way for deeper practice like meditation and developing wisdom.
Right, that makes total sense when things are, straightforward. But this is where we hit the really tough ethical spot, the one all our sources grapple with. What if someone is trying to seriously hurt someone you love, and the only way to stop them is physical force, which might mean hurting the attacker? Can that possibly be right action?
Well, if we're talking strictly about the path to liberation, to enlightenment, the answer is pretty stark. Any action that harms another being is technically a kusala kama, unwholesome physical action. In that specific context of ultimate liberation, it's not pure right action because it does create a karmic result, a consequence.
That's a challenging starting point. It almost sounds like spiritual purity means you might have to let harm happen if intervening breaks that rule.
It sounds that way initially, yes, but immediately we have to bring in the key factor, intention, satana. In Buddhist thinking, the mind behind the action is actually more significant than just the physical act itself. And this is where the deep dive really starts getting nuanced.
Okay, intention. So in that crisis moment, you've got this clash of potential intentions inside you. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's like two big forces pulling at you. On one hand, you could have a genuinely wholesome intention. That's driven by karuna, deep compassion, wanting your loved one to be free from suffering. And it's driven by sheer necessity, right? But on the other hand, your action could be fueled by something unwholesome, maybe just violence for its own sake, or, and this is really damaging karmically, hatred tosa, anger towards the attacker. Now, the outward result might look the same, the attacker is stopped, but the inner, the karmic impact, worlds apart.
So if I use force just enough to stop the threat, I still create some negative karma. But the sources suggest, and scholars seem to agree, that this necessary act of protection carries a lighter karmic weight than if I acted out of pure malice or anger. How should we think about lighter karma?
That's the vital distinction. If your action comes from hatred, if you want revenge, or if you use way more force than you absolutely need to stop the danger, well, that's creating heavy, unwholesome karma. That's violence, plain and simple. But if your heart is genuinely in a place of compassion and you're guided by wisdom, meaning you use only the minimum force needed just to stop the threat, with no desire to injure further or punish, then the karmic consequence is significantly lessened. It shifts, you see. It moves from being pure violence to what you might call a worldly necessity. And ideally, it's guided by mindfulness, by clear-headedness, by wisdom.
That difference, just stopping versus punishing, feels like the practical guide here. The aim changes from perfect spiritual non-harm, which might be impossible, to minimizing the total suffering in that situation. And this is where mindfulness, Sati, becomes absolutely critical, doesn't it? You have to be incredibly present in that moment to make sure your action is just about neutralizing the danger, not venting anger.
Precisely. It demands real presence of mind.
Okay, so let's tackle the next really difficult question. If you can't get away, if escape isn't an option, does the highest Buddhist ideal mean you just submit, let the harm happen? The sources seem to present two different ways of responding here.
Yes, this is a really important distinction they draw. Dimension one is what you could call the ideal of the noble person, the Arya, someone fully committed to the path of liberation. For them, the absolute priority is protecting the mind, keeping it pure from hatred, from any trace of vengeance, even if that means facing physical harm, even death.
Right, there's that famous story, the monk Putna. He wanted to teach in this really rough area, and people warned him. But he'd resolved, basically, that if people just cursed him, he'd think, how kind they are not to hit me. But hiss, and if they hit him, how kind they are not to kill me. And if they did kill him, well, he'd see it as finally getting the release, the nibbana he was aiming for. It's extraordinary courage.
It's the supreme standard, yes. It shows complete detachment from the body, from worldly concerns. For those highest practitioners, physical well-being is secondary to maintaining absolute ethical purity and mental calm.
But let's be honest, most of us listening aren't monks aiming for nibbana tomorrow. We're lay people. We have families, jobs, responsibilities in the world. So what's dimension two, the worldly Dhamma, the Lokiya Dhamma for us?
For lay people, the teaching is different. Submission isn't required. The very first step always is try to avoid the conflict, try to escape. That's actually right effort samma vayama in action. But if you can't escape, and force becomes absolutely necessary to protect yourself or others, then it's viewed almost as a kind of worldly duty. But, and this is key, only use the force needed to stop the immediate danger.
So this worldly duty framing accepts that the action isn't the perfect Arya ideal. It might not be pure Samma Kammanta in that ultimate sense, but it's a necessary, perhaps unavoidable choice in a messy world.
Exactly. The way it's often analyzed is this. If you act with genuine compassion for the person being protected, without malice towards the attacker and using only the necessary minimum force, you're performing the lightest possible unwholesome action in a terrible situation. The motivation is key. Compassion for the victim, not hatred for the aggressor. The world isn't perfect, and ethical choices sometimes mean picking the path that causes the least overall harm, the least negative karmic fallout for everyone involved.
That feels like a really important takeaway for navigating those extreme crisis moments, choosing the path of least harm, guided always by compassion. Okay, but most days aren't like that, thankfully. How do we bring Samma Kammanta, right action, into our everyday lives? Let's make it practical.
Yeah, absolutely. The daily practice is all about applying that same mindfulness and intention to our ordinary interactions.
Let's take work, for instance. Right action there is obviously more than just don't steal office supplies, right? It means integrity, honesty. But how does the non-harm principle fit into our jobs?
Well, it means actively trying not to exploit others. Say if you're a manager, action means you don't abuse your power. You don't exploit your employees' time or situation for unfair profit. If you're in sales, it means being honest about your product, not deceiving customers. It really comes back to intention again. Is your work just about personal gain, or are you trying to contribute something of value responsibly without causing harm along the way?
That really elevates it, doesn't it? It becomes an active commitment to ethical conduct, not just avoiding the worst. And at home, it's more than just fidelity, presumably.
It is. It's about fulfilling your responsibilities, making sure your actions contribute to harmony, not suffering. It means actively participating in your family duties, maintaining the kind of conduct that supports stability and peace within the home. It's about nurturing connection, really.
And what about the environment? That often gets left out of these kinds of ethical discussions.
It shouldn't be. Right action definitely extends to the natural world. It implies a kind of environmental mindfulness, not being needlessly destructive, not harming animals or ecosystems out of carelessness or convenience. It's broader than just saving pandas. It's about respecting all life and the resources we depend on, recognizing that interconnectedness.
So pulling it all together, Samma Kammanta isn't just a don't-do list. It's equally about the positive actions we should take, actions that are ideally informed by Sammaditthi right view.
Exactly. Right view gives you the why. If you understand basic principles like karma, the power of intention, the reality of suffering, then your actions naturally start to align with minimizing harm. Right action becomes the outward expression of that inner understanding, that wisdom.
Okay, so for you listening today, what's the practical takeaway? When you're facing any kind of ethical choice, whether it's huge or tiny, personal or professional, what's the process?
I think it starts with acknowledging that every action has ripples, consequences. When you hit that conflict point where maybe protecting someone or fulfilling a duty seems to clash with absolute non-harm, you use your mindfulness, your sati, and your wisdom, your panya. Try to figure out which course of action creates the least suffering, the least harm for everyone involved. And always, always check your intention. Is it focused purely on stopping danger or solving the problem? Or has anger, resentment, revenge crept in?
It sounds like the path that's closest to genuine right action, especially in our complicated world, is always the one driven by compassion, by karu, and guided by clear-headed wisdom. The second that anger, Tosa, takes the wheel, you're already off course.
That's a good way to put it. Remember the ideal. Protect the mind's purity above all. But if you find yourself in a situation where that feels impossible, then aim for the worldly standard. Minimize harm, act out of necessity and compassion, keep your heart free from malice.
That takes real courage, too. Thank you for joining us to dig into the nuances of right action. We hope this was helpful, and we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.